And welcome back. As we approach the November 2024 general election, New York City voters are preparing to make decisions on several critical ballot decisions. As we say, Citizens Union, as we speak, I should say, Citizens Union is with us today, and they're a long-standing advocate for transparency and accountability in local government. And they've reviewed these proposals and have provided clear recommendations to voters through this important process. We're pleased to be joined by the Director of Public Policy at the Citizens Union, Ben Weinberg. And Ben, thank you for joining us. And as we look at these proposals that are out there, these amendments, a lot's on the table for across the board.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Most voters think about voting for candidates this year, whether it's for the U.S. president, senator, or their local assembly member. But we do have 6 questions on the ballot. These are important questions. These are questions that will impact how our government is structured and how our kind of day-to-day lives are managed. So it is crucial for voters to remember to flip their ballots and to really think through those questions and whether they support or oppose them.
I'll ask the question that many people want to know. Is there something called amendment awareness? Because we know that so many people are just going to be so quick to go through that ballot after they hit the presidential and they're in the major local races that they're interested in. Sometimes that amendment doesn't even get touched.
It's one of the biggest challenges. People are not aware of those amendments. They are not aware of the fact that there are other questions on the ballot. And when they do reach the voting booth, they might not really understand what these questions mean. I mean, some of these questions you might see, they are very short. They're 30 words more or less, and they don't always explain exactly what the amendment will include. So it's a challenge for, I think, us civic advocates, for the media, and for everyone to try to get through the noise, get through the presidential race, media hustle and bustle, and try to educate voters about the importance of these questions.
Yeah, I know when I have conversations and we've done interviews before at polling places, and we've asked people sometimes, did you touch the amendment? And you'll also see by the results that sometimes the amendment is not touched, or they saw it, or they're not really sure, and that just begs the question about when someone's not sure whether or not they're just voting just for the sake of saying, it sounds good without knowing it. So I want to take the time, that we have here, break down a few of these amendments because Citizens Union has come up with a position on these, and just want to get your perspective as to how you reached the decision on a couple of these things. And number one, let's talk about the amendment to protect against unequal treatment. That's going to be amendment number 1. And so Citizens Union has recommended a yes on this proposal. Tell us a little bit about the amendment and why you feel like yes is the right answer.
Of course, thank you for the question. I'll first mention we're a nonpartisan organization. We've been around for over a century, really thinking about good government and good policies and good governance in New York City. So we take very seriously our kind of what we see our job or our calling as advising the public about these questions, and we have done so throughout the last century. This specific question involved what protections will the New York State Constitution have against discrimination, and what protections for individuals will the state constitution have. So currently what we have in our state Bill of Rights, we have protections on the basis of race, creed, religion, and color. So we don't have there anything related to sex or gender or disability or age or a whole host of other protections. And a crucial thing that is not in the Constitution today is the protections of the right to have an abortion, the right to choose, the right to for reproductive health care. What this proposed amendment will do is that it will insert these protections to our state constitution. Now, I should say these things are already in our state law. In New York State, you are protected from discrimination based on all the categories I've said, whether it's sex or gender orientation or national origin. And you also have a right to have an abortion, and that is protected in state law. But as we've seen in the last years, political winds change, governments change, even apparently court cases and decades of court precedents can change, as we've seen with the Supreme Court and the overturning of Roe versus Wade. So what this will do is this will enshrine these rights in our state constitution, and that will make it harder to roll back those rights in the future if anything does change in New York State.
Yeah. Let's take a look at another amendment, proposals 2 to 6. And these are the amendments that are actually going to go to the New York City Charter, the proposed amendments to the New York City Charter. And Citizen Union, from my understanding, says they're recommending a no on this.
That's right. We are recommending a no on questions 2 to 6. So these are the result of the work of what's called the Charter Revision Commission. These are proposals to amend our city's constitution. To amend our city's constitution, the city charter, we sometimes mayors establish a commission that looks into our whole charter, the whole city constitution, and thinks what are the best ways to improve it. Now, these commissions are kind of like a blue ribbon commissions. The benefit of them is that they take time, they go through the process, they really think things thoroughly. They seek public input. They speak with experts, with just everyday New Yorkers, with legal experts. They have public hearings. It takes a while. The concerning thing about these questions is that the commission that created them did not go through this kind of proper, regular process of a charter revision commission. It existed for less than 2 months during the summer, during the primary election system. There wasn't much time for public hearings. There wasn't much time for public input. There wasn't much time for research and really look at these issues thoroughly. As I mentioned, we have experience with the charter revision commissions. Just to give you a sense, the last one in 2021 took about 9 months. The one before that took over a year to complete its work. And this one was announced only 2 months before the deadline to come up with amendments and questions. So in our view, this is not the way to really go through a process of amending our constitution, our city's constitution. And we think this flawed process should be rejected. And this flawed process also created some flawed questions, which we can discuss.
Yeah. And so of this, what's the major concern here when you look at proposals 2 through 6 and these revisions to the Charter Revision Commission? The main concern on the part of Citizens Union is what?
So, our main concern is that they were drafted pretty hastily. The commission that created them was created in rush. It was, some would say, politically motivated as well. There was not much reason to establish this commission, and certainly not in this timeline. So our main concern is that the proposals that are now on the ballot are a result of this rush, hasty, kind of unserious process to amend our city constitution. Now, some of these questions are also negative on themselves, on the merits. Like, for example, I don't know if you want to go into these issues, but question 4 deals with how public safety bills are legislated. Has major issues in it, but even some of the other questions that might look good on paper, didn't really go through the proper process of really verifying and scrutinizing them. They should go through a process where people do have the ability to give feedback. Experts can take a look at them. We see the research behind these bills and proposals.
Ben, you did talk about public safety. I do want you to talk about that here. When you look at that public safety situation, let's unpack that for our viewers.
Sure. So one of the questions that will be on the ballot, that's question number 4, deals with how to pass bills related to public safety. So what that proposed charter amendment would do is that it would say that every time the city council votes on a bill related to public safety of the police department, the fire department, and the Department of Correction, the mayor and the commissioner in charge of that agency will receive more time and more notice before that vote, and will have the ability to call their own public hearing. Now, we have some issues with that proposal. First, we think the way that legislation works, the way that our government works, is that it's the city council, it's the legislative body that is supposed to draft laws and pass laws. The executive, the mayor, does have a role in this. They can veto a bill. That's how it works. But the mayor and the agencies should not really have a role in the legislative process. We think that's really a disruption to our separation of powers. Now, specifically on public safety, we looked into whether public safety bills do require more time, do require more opportunities for public input. We actually looked at all the laws that the council has passed in the last 10 years. That's over 1,700 laws. And we saw that the time that is given to bills that relate to public safety it's the same time, more or less, as bills related to other issues. So we don't really see a reason why those bills related to public safety should be given preferential treatment. Why are we creating this system of two-tier system within our legislative process that will give the agencies that deal with public safety or the stakeholders around public safety more opportunities to comment on bills than, let's say, housing or environment or advocates related to labor rights?
So for yourself, I mean, obviously we know how Citizens Union recommends a no vote on proposals 2 through 6, but I do want to take time and also talk about proposal number 3, and that is the additional estimates of the cost of proposed laws and updates to budget lines. And so how do you see this playing out here?
So yeah, a great question. So proposal 3, what it would do, or I should say, today, before every bill is passed, the city council, which passes the bill, must issue a statement that assesses the cost of that bill, of that future law. So that helps the public and the council and everyone prepare and have a better sense of whether the proposal is worth the money that it might require the government to spend. Now, that's how things currently work. The council publishes that cost assessment. This proposal would say that the mayor's budget office should also publish its own assessment of the cost of bills. And the mayor would also get some notice. And this is another case where we see a possible intrusion of the executive into the task of the legislature. It is the work of the city council and lawmakers to collect the information needed to draft bills, to collect the information on costs and the cost analysis of bills in order to decide whether they want to pass a bill or not. We see this as a potential intrusion into the task of legislation. You mentioned some budget deadlines. This proposal also moves some budget deadlines, which are it's a reasonable proposal. But again, you could do this through a more thorough process. The council can pass a law to move these budget deadlines. You don't really need to go through this whole commission process, which, as I mentioned, was done in haste.
And so as we look in New York City, for more particularly, let's talk about this for a moment, because I do want to talk about the powers, right? The powers that be. Because when we talk about these amendments, some of this flows from the powers that be. And there's the legislative and then there's executive powers in New York City. How do we get to a place of really balancing both those legislative and executive powers?
It's a great question. I think one of the things that we have seen in the last year is that these two powers, the two sides, are fighting all the time, right? So the Mayor Adams, and the city council that is also led by Speaker Adams, right? Adrian Adams and Eric Adams on both sides, are really at it for a while now, fighting over a whole host of issues, and specifically public safety and their approach to public safety. Now, part of it is just there's healthy tension between these two sides. There's the side that passes laws and tells the administration what to do, and there's the side that actually does that and implements these laws. And in New York City, we do have what's called a strong mayoral system. So the mayor has the kind of almost full control over city government. and a lot of control over the budget as well. But what we do see in the last year is that there's a power struggle between these two sides. Part of that played out through the charter amendments, through these attempts to curtail the power of the other side. The city council, you might remember, a few months ago passed a law that required not all, many commissioners to be approved by the city council itself. Today, the mayor has the ability to approve almost all commissioners himself or herself. And that law to change the way that commissioners are appointed did not pass because the mayor appointed his own this charter commission that we were speaking of. So all this is to say that we're in the situation where these two sides keep going back and forth and fighting over who has power and are trying to curtail the power of the other side. This isn't healthy. This isn't how we should work, and we definitely would hope that these two sides focus more on governing than on trying to fight each other.
Yeah. And as we look at the city council and we see the work that's going on there, city council, the mayor obviously have to have that relationship in order to get the job done. Some of these amendments that we talked about, these things that we talked about prior, a lot of it's going to beat between these two groups, city council and then also the mayor, and then it fleshes itself out to New Yorkers. If there is a no vote and we see a no on these amendments, how do we see things playing out in a balance of power there? Where do we go from here?
It's a great question. So if there's a no vote on questions 2 to 6, it won't have a huge impact on our lives since nothing will change. These proposals want to change something, and so that change will be stopped. But I imagine this will impact the politics of it. These are perceived as questions that were put forward by Mayor Adams and are kind of his initiative to, again, as part of this fight with the city council. If these questions are defeated by the voters, it will probably indicate, or this will be perceived as a win by the city council, a win for the city council. City council is actively advocating against these questions, and I think the result of these questions will probably be interpreted as a win if it passes, a win for the city council, and if it is rejected, a win for the city council. If it passes, the mayor will probably tout it as kind of an indication for maybe a revised mandate, maybe support from voters.
Are you optimistic that a lot of people will really pay attention to the amendments and the things that really are, because these things are critical. I mean, in addition to voting for the person, knowing about these amendments and the things that these amendments are calling for, very critical for New Yorkers. Are you optimistic that with this presidential election, more people coming to the polls, that you will see more people actually take an affirmative voice? And when I say an affirmative voice, I mean a voice by just voting and going there and casting their thoughts on the amendments.
I am, and the reason is that we have the higher turnout in presidential elections, in these even-numbered years presidential elections. So we know we'll have the most amount of people in the polls starting from the October 26th. And when people go to the polls, that you're right, and we've said some of them go there without really knowing that there will be bad questions, but a whole lot of them prepare and read about bad questions and see shows like this and talk to their friends. So I do think that this will receive higher turnout, and there might be more voter knowledge on these questions than if it would have been in a different year when turnout is much lower, awareness is much lower, and people really don't think about electoral politics.
Yeah. And so for people who want to find out more information, I know we're getting down to the wire here, amendments, all these other things. How do they go about getting that information so they can make an informed decision?
So you can go to our website, citizensunion.org, and you'll find our complete guide on these amendments and our recommendations. And you can also go to NYC Votes. That's the website of the New York City Campaign Finance Board, and the voter guide that all voters get to their homes. You can find a digital version of that at NYC Votes.
everybody builds up towards the election, and after the election, it's like almost like everybody, gets quiet and people go back to where they go. But for you, the work does always continues year round. Talk to me just real quick before we go about what's going to happen after the election and the focus.
Well, hopefully we'll have a safe election, and that will. I think there's a lot of fears about how this election will play out. But you're right. Our work continues. I talked a bit about the kind of the flaws that we have identified in how charters are revised and kind of revising our city's constitution. So we are definitely going to work at the state level in Albany to try to change that, to make sure that state law as it is now does not allow for this kind of political fight and gamesmanship over our city constitution.
Yeah, it's very important. And for people who want more information about Citizens Union, tell them again how to get there.
Citizensunion.org, or go to our social media accounts and please vote.
Yeah. And Ben, I want to get your thought, and before I got to let you go after this one here, but I want to get your thought about the climate, right? I think it's been a pretty polarizing climate, a pretty divisive climate. How hard has that made the work that you've had to do, given the fact that we understand that there's all of these barriers out there that are I'm not going to say unprecedented, but they're pretty heightened and they're pretty challenging?
It's an excellent question. We are, again, an organization of over a century. We've been around since the late 19th century, and we've always supported a strong democracy. We've always supported the right to vote, making it easier to vote. Some of these issues we have seen in recent years, these are issues that used to be part of the consensus, and we had agreement on both sides. We had agreement with all candidates and parties. Unfortunately, some of these issues, especially around democracy, about the peaceful transfer of powers, about counting all votes and making it easier to vote, they have been politicized, and have become more contentious than in the past. And we do fear what will happen with this upcoming election. There are concerns that some of the tenets regarding rule of law and democracy that we've considered as sacred and thought that are part of the kind of political and cultural norms might be fading away, or at least might be not followed by some parts of our political system. So I think it's up to us to make sure that we can stand strong on the tenets and principles of democracy, of rule of law, and of the peaceful transfer of power.
Yeah. It's peaceful transfer of power is going to be a huge topic of discussion, and no matter which way it goes, are you concerned at all when it comes to New York City? We got a mayoral election that will be coming up soon too. A lot that's on the table. With our current mayor. Tell me just the thoughts of Citizens Union and how you're approaching really the work, given the fact that you've got all this stuff going on around the circling, City Hall.
I think there are two elements to this. One is that or because the mayor is under indictment, because so many people that are close to him and top officials have resigned or might resign or might see indictments as well, there is a concern that the city won't be governed, or that it will be at least very challenging to govern the city, to govern this huge beast that is City Hall with its thousands and thousands of workers, and that key major policy initiatives won't be moved forward. A separate concern are the things that we saw in the indictment itself of Mayor Adams and what has been exposed there, which, if they are true, and we do not know, they do present or signify a pretty, I would say, deep betrayal in the trust of New Yorkers, especially around violating campaign finance law, bribery, and a whole host of ethical misconduct. So these are concerning, and certainly things that we have to continue to look at. And what the next year, what we have in store next year, we don't know. And I think we have to take it a week by week at this point and be really vigilant on making sure that our government works and operates as cleanly as possible.
Yeah, and I think that's a lot to really, pay attention to. But you bring up a good point about policy. With you have a mayor that's under indictment. Obviously, you need time to talk to your lawyers, the legal, and this, that, and third, and go to court. This, that, and third. I think what's on the heart and minds of a lot of people is how much policy is going to be enacted and/or affected through this indictment. And so far, with all that we've seen. Can you give your assessment as to what you've been able to see? I mean, has policy been on the halt?
It's hard to tell now because this is still rather new. The indictment came out a few weeks ago, and we have seen this series of resignations of top officials. Now, the trash will be picked up, and teachers will continue to teach. So, city government will continue to operate, but one example is the mayor's main housing initiative, which is called City of Yes. It's planned by the Department of Planning. That is moving forward. That has this. It's in this rare situation where it has support or potential support from various sides of the political spectrum. The progressive side, business groups, housing advocates, council, and the mayor. So here's an example of one major policy that can still move forward. Hopefully, it will. But other big changes, other big reforms, we don't really know. We're heading into an election year. An election year is always a kind of, unstable period. And, the mayor is politically weaker than before. And that could impact the, I would say, ability of him to receive collaboration from not only the city council but other stakeholders, or to even recruit top personnel to important officials or important positions.
Yeah. Ben Weinberg, we got to leave it there, but thank you, my friend, for taking the time and talking with us, the great work that's going on. He's the Director of Public Policy at Citizens Union, breaking down some of these amendments and all that is going on across NYC, and a lot to talk about. And we'll have to have you back so that we can continue this conversation.
Please do. Thank you so much.
All righty. We are taking a quick break, and guess what? We'll be back with more right after this.